1995, with Williams and Thompson replaced by Perry Belmonte and Jason Cooper, The Cure begun recording their 10th full studio album. Wild Mood Swings was released in 1996, and a world tour followed.
The brief was really to move the band on from where they'd been, because they'd been one of the biggest bands of the 80s and the early 90s, and he felt that my impression was that he felt slightly stagnated in what they'd been, and now was a whole new evolution of the band, because two of the major members of the band had left. When I started, there was no drummer, so we gradually put the band together over the first recording sessions, and that was quite amusing, where what we did was we put the basics of the tracks together, obviously myself recording and running around, and then Robert, Perry and Simon playing along to a click track, and then the drummers would come along and they would play just to that, not with the rest of the band. So I would have to put this relationship together between myself and the drummer as a musician and the rest of the band. So that was an interesting position to be in, and Robert would be kind of in this huge house with the rest of the band, sort of popping their head around the corner and seeing how things were going. So it was very different beginnings to a record. The title in itself sort of encompasses basically the feel of the whole record, because there are lots of different types of songs on it, from Want, which is I think the lead opening song, which is a full-on kind of wild rock track, to something like Bear, which is I think the last song on the record, which is this fantastically moody, big string, acoustic guitar kind of lament, and then the 13th, which is this almost Brazilian-esque, South American-esque anyway, a Western European's eye on what they think South American music can sound like. There's lots of different flavours in the record, and I think that's a good thing, even though I might feel that there may be too many songs on the whole album.
After the low-key release of another singles compilation, Galore, in 1998, The Cure began surfacing at the European summer festivals. Another studio album, Blood Flowers, was released in 2000 and was genuinely well received. The album managed to recapture the quintessential Cure sound and was seen as something of a return to form for the band. Smith revealed that after Faith and Disintegration, Blood Flowers was the third instalment of a trilogy. In 2001, The Cure broke with Fiction Records, and Smith began to feel that the band had reached the end of its natural life. 1 year later, highly regarded producer and lifelong Cure fan Ross Robinson bumped into Smith at a hotel in Switzerland. Robinson, an influential new metal producer of acts such as Slipknot and Korn, persuaded Smith to begin another Cure project. The band signed a 3-album deal with Geffen in May 2004, and their self-titled album, The Cure, was released in June of the same year.
It is surprisingly good. I wasn't much of a fan of Blood Flowers, which was their last one. It was billed as the sort of third part in the depressing trilogy that is Pornography, Disintegration. It was part 3. It was still, it was still an alright record. But I don't think expectations for this one were that high. But coming to it, in fact, if people have heard Franz Ferdinand or The Strokes or The Rapture, dropping Cure's name, and wonder what they're getting into, it's actually a really good record to buy, because it does basically see Rob Smith, dabbling in all the things that he's done at various stages in his career.
It sounds like all the classic bits of Cure stuck into one record. It's got a darkness to it. It's got a good driving bass line, melodic bass line. It's got the kind of like classic Robert Smith vocals, but it's also encased in a really good pop song as well, So it's like they kind of like merge all the good periods of the band back into one like kind of song, which is a way to do a great comeback. Is get everything you were good at put into one song if you can. So I think he's pulled that one off.
I mean, I just think they'll go on and on and on. I can't see Robert. I mean, unless Robert fell out of love with music, or Robert suddenly, you know, got some kind of block where he couldn't write anything. But I just see The Cure going on and on and on, and we'll all be at the nursing home singing old Cure songs, and Robert might come in and do us a couple of new ones.
Well, it's interesting with Robert Smith because every single time they put an album out, he always said it's the last one. They're going to split the band up and that's it, it's all over. But I think they've been making records for another 20 years. You know, I can't imagine him going out making a solo record. If he can make a solo record, but it won't be a serious record. I mean, Robert Smith is a Cure, and the Cure is Robert Smith. There's no getting away from it. So I can see the Cure just every few years putting out another record. I mean, especially if they pull this comeback off, which is a very important one, and they do get a new record to do really well, it'll give them a platform to keep making new records. And I think they'll keep trying to find new boundaries and new ways of trying to be the Cure, but it'll still fit within their kind of either kind of the poppy Cure or the dark Cure kind of parameter.
Well, I think Robert Smith will maintain the idea of the Cure until his dying days, as he always has done. Every time he's died, he's always held on to the idea of the Cure, and in a funny sort of way, he's died many times and always held on to the idea of the Cure. And I think as an artist, he can keep going because he'll always have interesting things to say because he is an artist, and he'll always have kind of thoughts about how he can sonically make that contemporary. Not in a fashionable way, not, you know, suddenly becoming hip-hop or suddenly, you know, R&B or nicking, you know, kind of transient studio techniques, but just as a you know, a new piece of work that necessarily brings forward his past with him to create this kind of oeuvre that he now realises he has, you know. So I personally think, you know, that however much he tries to fool us now by pretending it's the last one or the farewell or the goodbye, just the very nature of the fact he's an artist will mean he keeps coming and, in a genuine sense, keeps surprising us with what he does.
I think The Cure became such a success because the time was right for punk had opened the doors, and then other stuff was going to come through, and The Cure were doing something that didn't sound like anything else at all. There was absolutely nothing doing around like them, and the sound was different, but the songs were still perfect.
I think The Cure, more than perhaps any band in history, succeeded entirely on their own terms. They're absolutely impossible to pin down to just one thing, and that's, for a band that's been around for as long as they have, that's incredible. You know, every other band becomes a cartoon sooner or later, and while there are cartoonish elements to what The Cure do, you can never just pin them down to one musical style. You can never just pin them down to, you know, one lyrical theme. You can never even pin Robert Smith down to just one haircut, because he has had more than one throughout his career. And that's probably the key to The Cure, is that they've never rested on their laurels. They've never just thought, well, let's make an album to please our goth fan base, you know, another album of gloomy rock. He's always kind of reacting against what he's done before. He always wants to take things somewhere different, and he nearly always has, and that's why The Cure was successful.
They never stopped working, and I think it was a time when, if you're playing live, there's a certain momentum that just builds up naturally, and timing is everything, and they were the right all-male band to be hitting America at that point. They kind of represented something to Americans that they couldn't get from their homegrown people.
They were very good at being a pop band, even though they came from a very left field kind of scene. They always had, Ross had always had a very good melodic touch. He's also a very good pop star, and he's very charismatic. And also, they just hit a nerve, you know, for all the for people sitting in their bedrooms, miserable kid types. They always hit a nerve, those kind of people. So even when they went poppy, they just hit another generation, those kind of people, you know. So the more kind of artistic kind of people zoned in on The Cure, and I think they've always been very, very good at doing that. I think he became a very good pop star because he looked really like a pop star. Like pop stars have to look kind of cuddly as well, but he also managed to keep the dark side in there as well, which is like a very, very good trick to play. You can still get taken serious as an artist even though you're a pin-up and you're a smash hits kind of pop star. There's a fine balancing act and one that he managed to pull off.
He has a beautiful voice. He has a great guitar technique, and writes the songs that, as a pop song unbelievably catchy, and as sonic experiences, unbelievably